Okay. All right. Well, welcome to the stream. So, for those who don't know, today will be the start of the long journey to remake this scarf. It's a bit bulky, but as the title suggests, it's it's a Revali scarf from Breath of the Wild, the Champions Ballad DLC, complete with the tails and everything, and it's all one piece. So good color work. The tails are 1x1 rib, which we'll be starting on today. There are a few mistakes that I made in the original that I kind of want to correct with this new one. And I will mention that this new one will not be the same as this one exactly. It's going to be different colors, different insignia here. I'm not going to say exactly what the insignia is just yet, just because I want it to be a bit of a surprise. But basically, yeah, so this entire process is going to consist of making this entire thing minus the tassels, although I'll show how to make it, how to make the tassels once we get to those. But it'll include making the tails, both sides. It'll show how to sew them together. It'll show how to do the color work once we get down to those and actually make the insignia. And one thing I didn't mention in my original post on Twitter explaining these is that the insignias, since I wanted the tails to be symmetrical, they're done in 1x1 ribs. They're kind of stretchy. They don't need to be, but the reason why they're done in 1x1 rib is so that they are reversible. So you can see that the color work here, of course, looks normal on one side, and on the other side, it still looks normal. So you don't have kind of the border that comes around here that most color work usually has. That's a technique in knitting called reversible intarsia. So I'll show how to do that. I'll show how to sew in the ends. Of course, once we get to the bigger piece, I'll show what pattern this uses. I guess how to set it up, how to do the increases on the very ends that looks somewhat symmetrical. If I can get in the light here, so that looks somewhat symmetrical. And like I said, I won't be doing the tassels on the next scarf that I'm going to be doing, mainly just because I think for the style of the design that I'm going for and the colors, and I guess what the design is going to be based off of, it's not going to be exactly true to the original game like this one is. It'll have the same overall shape with kind of this L shape where the tails hang off the back, but it'll just be different colors and a different insignia. So let's get started. Let me fold this up here just so it doesn't, you know, just so it doesn't look terrible if it's just sitting there. But once I get this folded up, we'll get started. So in the description, I also said that I taught myself how to knit for this project. This is my very first project. I'm definitely very proud of it. It took me about 2 months to make in total with all the planning and just knitting it out entirely, learning all different techniques. But this is the great thing about knitting is that you don't really need to learn very much. Like once you learn, how to knit, do a knit stitch, a purl stitch, and then I guess whatever pattern you're working in, whether it's stockinette, 1x1 rib, or even something like this pattern, which is really just a modified stockinette that just kind of looks like a weave almost, or even garter stitch. It all consists of just how you set up the knit and purls. So really all you need to learn is the knit stitch and the purl stitch. And once you do that, it's just a time killer. You just go on and do it. Of course, you need to learn how to cast on and, do the other increases and the decreases like on the tails here. And of course the color work, which definitely gets a lot more involved and a lot more messy in terms of managing terms of managing your yarn, but it's definitely not impossible, and it only gets better over time. Because, like I said, that's the thing about knitting, is that it's a total time killer. So, in order to get into the materials, of course, this is a lot of yarn. I would say it's at least a pound in total. But so, going over the materials, I'm going to introduce the yarn I'm using for this scarf in terms of the colors. So, like I said, it's about a pound because I used almost the entire skein of these for that scarf, because most of it is just the base color. So this is the base color. You can see it's a little bit different from this one, such that the original design is a little bit off-white, but this is just going to be a pure white scarf for the colors that I'm using. And so, yeah, you're going to use almost an entire pound of this, especially depending on if you use the tassels or not. That'll take a little bit more. So a pound of just pure white, and then for all the colors on tails, and if the tassels, if you choose to do them, for this project, instead of the kind of beige on the insignia and then the red and yellow accents, this time I'm going to be using a light blue insignia with the dark navy or navy blue for the border on the tails where it tapers off, and then a nice shiny silver for the little accents there. So yeah, so let's get started. So of course, as usual, you're going to want, let's see here, you're going to want a nice pair of scissors. So my mom was nice enough to give me these before, or I guess when I was doing this a year ago. So a nice collapsible pair of scissors for cutting your yarn. Of course, needles, which I use these needles, which have a little piece of plastic tubing that connects them. And this is for knitting what they call in the round instead of flat. So if you want to knit something like a sweater and you want to do a sleeve, then that's what you would use these for. But I just find them a lot more manageable because, you can have an entire piece of work on here such that it won't fall off if it actually slips off the back of the needle. So it just keeps everything very manageable. These fit nicely in your hands, so when you are knitting, you just don't have to worry as much if you have longer needles. I will say though, you will need this type of needle eventually once you start working on the very long part that goes around the neck. And that's mainly because in order to get this kind of pattern, to include all the increases here and doing in garter stitch around the edges, to make it all look right, you're going to have to cast on the long edge instead of the short edge. So the entire 40 inches you're going to have to cast on and work along, which is a pain, but it makes it look a lot better. It was pretty much the only way I figured I could do it. But let me show you really quick. Also, so the reason why I talked about the needles is that these were the needles that I started on doing the tails, which, it was fine, but I didn't know how big of needles I would need for the tail, which, is 6 inches, at least halfway up the needle, but you can bunch up the fabric when it's on the needle, which I didn't know. So these work, but they're way too long for my taste, which is why, you can already see just the 6 inches of this needle compared to the entire length of those needles. It's just ridiculous. So when you're working like this, it's just ridiculous. It's totally impractical. But yeah, get yourself a pair of these if you want to save yourself a lot of hassle. So let's get started. I already said that, but let's actually get started this time. So let's get this ball of yarn off of here. Okay, so let's move all this out of the way. Let's see where the start is here. I don't want to unnecessarily unravel this entire thing. There it is. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is starting with a long tail cast on. and we're going to cast on for 48 stitches. I'm mainly going off of what I did for this scarf in terms of how many stitches I need. It's going to be a little bit different because I'm adjusting some of the dimensions, but for the tails, it's going to be exactly the same. And I'll post more information about this in the description once this stream is over. But yeah, so we're going to cast on, do a long tail cast on, because why not? I don't really know how much stuff I'll need for this, but let's just be liberal about it. Let's just do that. We'll have plenty left over because we're not doing the tassels, so it doesn't really matter. So in terms of long tail cast on, make sure you have a very long tail. And then you're going to want to make a slip knot, which you just cross over, make a loop that crosses over, and stick it around the piece of yarn, the one that's closest to your ball of yarn. And then thread it through, and then pull. You should have a nice little loop that can slip. So a nice little slip knot. So what I like to do, just to make sure it's not too bad of a not too tight of a cast on, is I like to cast on around 2 needles. Okay, wrong way around. So 2 needles, just so you have enough, so it's not too tight once you start working the second row. And then make sure you pull to tighten. And then basically what you're going to do is make sure that you have the string or the yarn that's attached to your ball in front. Of course, the tail and back. Let's get all that out of here. And then I'm not going to go into too much detail about how to actually cast on, because it's kind of hard to explain. But there's plenty of videos online if you want to learn how to do that. But I'm just going to cast on 48 stitches, and I got to make sure I don't lose my count here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I definitely overestimated how much yarn I'm going to need. 12. Can't lose count. 13. 14. This is one of the problems with doing a long tail cast on, is the yarn starts to twist, I guess, such that I don't know, kind of becomes uneven. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 15, 14. Okay, that's what I thought. See, I can't lose count. I don't want to lose count. 14, 15, 16, 17, 17. Oh. And unfortunately, when you're starting out, you will make a lot of mistakes, so don't worry. Let's just make sure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 17. Good. 18. Make sure when you're doing the long tail cast on, you make sure you hold down your last stitch that's on there with your finger, just like that. Just hold down. Cast on. 19. 20, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we got, I think, 24 stitches. I'm just going to count and make sure, just because I don't. Because once you have your cast on, that's, unless you do an increase or a decrease, you're going to have that number of stitches going forward. So definitely want to make sure you don't get this wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Good. Usually, I mean, if I were smart, I'd use stitch markers, which for me are just paper clips, but it's not that big of a deal when it's only this number of stitches. So 25, 26. I'm going to try and talk a little bit less for these last stitches. 27. I messed that one up again. 27. 28. 29. 30. 31. 32. 33. 34. 35. 36. It's starting to get a little bit loose. And I'm starting to get, shoot. See, this is what I'm talking about. I keep losing my place. But as I was saying, though, just so I don't have to repeat it, lose my place again. So you can see here, if I lift up the ball of yarn, it starts to twist like that. And that'll happen as you're knitting. And it's not great because it's starting to make my stitches a little bit loose. But easy way to solve that is just to twist your ball of yarn around. Just around itself until it becomes, you know, relatively not twisted. Hopefully I can tuck this in as well. Now I gotta recount really quick because I keep losing my dang place. Tuck that in there, just so it's a little more managed. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. See, if I was at 37, I'm on 36. 37. 38. 39. 40. 41. 42. 43. 44. 45. 46. 47. And 48. 48. So like I said, even if I spread out the stitches a little bit here, it's not that long. the tails themselves are supposed to be 6 inches, which I mean this is about 6 inches, but it seems bunched up, but it'll start to come it'll start to expand once you start doing the ribbing, once you start getting into pattern. But as we can see, with the entire goal of casting on is to make a nice little start. Let me see. Is to make a nice little starting edge for your knitting, and that's how you start. So, let me get more light back here. Sorry if it's a little overexposed. And the location isn't that great. I just moved into this apartment, so I'm sitting basically on the floor here on a blow-up bed. But let's see here. So now that we've done that, we really don't need this freakishly long tail that I mistakenly made way too long. I think it's supposed to be about as long as the number of stitches that you're supposed to have, or maybe it's like 2 times as long or so. You know, about that much, because that's basically what it's doing is it's taking this length of yarn, going all the way over here, all the way up the cast on. Of course, with the wrapping of the stitches, so it's a little bit longer than that. But I don't know. I always like to. It's always better to overestimate than underestimate when you're doing that kind of stuff. So leave a little bit of a tail just to leave in later and to work with. But this piece here we can just discard. So just throw it over there, make a pile, whatever. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can pull off one of our needles. Okay, so then we cast on this way, so we're going to want to flip our work over such that now we have working yarn in this hand. All right, so I think for starting off the 1x1 rib, you can start. The great thing about casting on is that all the stitches are exactly the same, so you can start off your first row however you want. So in this case, I'm going to be doing a slip stitch selvage, and that'll make a nice even edge on the tails without the bumps being as pronounced. It'll just make a nice clean edge. So let's start off by doing that. So slip as if to knit. That's what I'm going to start off with for this tail, and I have to remember that for the time I'm doing the opposite tail. Slip one knitwise. Tighten that down. Then we're going to want to bring the yarn over as if to purl, and then purl one. I really hope I'm not screwing this up. Okay, we're good. Then we put the yarn over, and then we knit one. Good. Bring the yarn over. Purl one. Yarn over. Knit one. And this is the basic pattern for doing a 1x1 rib. You just keep alternating back and forth with knitting one and then purling one. So in this case, we go back over. Row 1, back over, knit 1, back over, row 1. And you just do this for this entire row until you get to the very end. Sometimes I like to pull down on the cast on row there, just to make sure. Just keep alternating knitting and purling, and that creates your 1x1 rib. Hey, how's it going? And this is really why you want to make sure you do the double needle cast on, because if your needles are a little bit sticky, especially if you start doing your first row very tight, and especially your cast on very tight, it's going to be very difficult, as I learned the hard way, to actually make your first row. My needles are getting sticky. And that'll just be because of the oils in your hands and sweating, which is very hot down here, but it's not too bad. Occasionally, sometimes what I'll do is just grab like a paper towel or something and basically just rub down the needles just so they're not catching too much, not gripping too much onto the yarn. Nothing you can really do about the yarn in terms of it getting oils and stuff on it until the very end once you wash it, but you can clean your needles off at least. Of course, if you don't make your knitting as tight as well, it won't grip as much, but it's mainly the needles, the oils on the needles. Yeah, so you just get into this pattern of purling, yarn over, knitting. So that one is it definitely looks like it, and a lot of people do think that it's the Rebel Alliance emblem, but no, it's the Rito emblem from Breath of the Wild. Although the emblem that I'm going to be doing on this scarf, because it's not going to be the exact same one, it'll be the same design. Or I guess it'll be the same design in terms of the shape of the scarf, but not the insignia. The insignia is going to be something a little bit different this time around. I want it to be a little bit of a surprise if you don't already know, but back over. Here we go. Now we're starting to get into the groove. But the colors are going to be pretty much like the polar opposite of. Yeah, I mean, I seriously recommend it. And well, this last scarf was also featured in Age of Calamity, which another great game. If you haven't played that one, I highly recommend it. It's definitely different from Breath of the Wild, but I mean, same overall story with the same characters and Voice acting and music. Actually, the music is way better than Breath of the Wild. Oh well, I guess it's different. It's definitely better from like an action standpoint. Um, but yeah, I mean, I highly recommend that game. Uh, but yeah, in terms of the colors, it's gonna be, you know, instead of an off-white, it's just gonna be white. Instead of the yellow and red, it's gonna be navy and silver, and then the insignia is gonna be a light blue, which I guess it's kind of like an inside joke in terms of those colors. Like if you know, then you know what colors those are. I've never played any. Well, that's not true. I played a Metroid game for the Wii like way, way back. My dad was obsessed with it, but I haven't. I never really got even past the first level in that in that game, and even then, I'm not sure if it was necessarily my style at the time. But maybe I should. I mean, I should probably pick it up. I literally just started up Skyward Sword as well. I've heard it's pretty good. From looking at the gameplay, it looks really good. Uh, but yeah, I just started up Skyward Sword yesterday, so I'm like, that's my new game, I guess. I still need to finish my Breath of the Wild Master Mode run. Um, but oh shoot, did I just messed that up? No, I think we're good. Um, but yeah, I mean it's okay. It's Skyward Sword is okay so far. I definitely am hooked on Breath of the Wild more, of course, since it's my first Zelda game. That's like, what I'm always gonna think is the standard. But it's okay. I'll shoot. Yeah, definitely don't let the stitches slip off the needle if you can. Eh, it's always gonna be a little bit rough the first time around. Of course, I haven't actually done any knitting in months, uh, but it'll get better as you go along, especially once you get a few rows into it. It's probably better to have a bit of a more loose cast on row just because it'll make knitting it to the neck portion a little bit easier. Or I guess sewing it, I should say, to the neck portion a little bit easier. But in the meantime, just do your best. Um, yeah. First row is kind of annoying because you don't really have anything to grip onto for uh, for your offhand, your non-working hand. But you just gotta get past it. And since it's so loose, it likes to slip off very easily. It's all right. We're almost done here. That's the last few stitches. And once I remember literally just sitting down back in November of last year while I was still in college, just sitting down in my apartment and literally just doing this for hours on end. Just put on something in the background and just do this because it really is just a mindless. Really is just a mindless task. And it's all starting to come back to me now, just doing this over and over again. I remember my hands would start to hurt after a while because I was doing it for literally hours. I mean, for a whole pound of yarn at least, the scarf is just huge. If I remember correctly, it's like 36,000 individual stitches or something like that. I don't want to knit into that one more purl. So doing this motion for 36,000 times is not necessarily easy, but I mean, over the course of 2 months, it'll get there. If you do it like, every day, like I was practically doing. But luckily, I don't have to plan as much this time. I actually kind of know what I'm doing. I actually know all the techniques now, and so it won't be as bad. The real part that sucks about doing the tails is that if you mess up, then you have to go back into the row and redo it from where you messed up, which really sucks because you have to redo a bunch of stitches and take them off the needle, redo them basically twice, and then do it all again. And if you mess up, down an entire row, yeah, I know, right? Well, I wouldn't be surprised if I already have like a strong ass thumb from doing this. Okay, so now we're at the last stitch for this row. And so what you're going to want to do is, for the last stitch, in terms of the tails, you're just going to do the same thing as you usually do, just going in pattern. So in this case, we're going to purl this last stitch and slip it off the needle, and there you go. So that's your second row. I guess technically your first working row done, and it's a little rough around the edges, but like I said, I like to pull down on the edge a little bit just to clean all the purl bumps up, make it a little bit neater. And the great thing about 1x1 rib is that it's symmetric, such that it won't curl one way or another. So it's very nice, very stretchy, very easy to work pattern. It's just a matter of I guess getting the technique down and not messing up, because it's much easier to mess up doing 1x1 if you're not careful and you're not paying attention than it is for stockinette stitch, where you're doing either a knit stitch or a purl stitch on the entire row instead of alternating like this one. But yeah, nice clean edge on the cast on. Just spread it out, and then you're going to do the exact same thing starting off the last row as you're going to do this one, such that we just ended with a purl stitch. So we're going to want to slip it knitwise. Is that correct? Crap, I can't remember. I think it's always knit the knits and purl the purls. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Well, when in doubt, Google it, as I always say. Let's see here. Slip one knitwise, slip one purlwise. Yeah, I think it's slip one purlwise. So knit the knits, purl the purls. If you want good 1x1 ribbing, otherwise it's like some other pattern, but could have done a little bit better on that part. But oh yeah, kind of like it's either a loom or like, I guess if it was in the round, but it must have been like one of those kind of little tools. I consider getting one of those, but it's like I don't even know if that's considered knitting. That might be like crochet a little bit, but which frankly I don't really understand too much what the difference is other than the technique. But I mean, I don't know. I just thought knitting because yeah, you can't really make super complex color work like that, and I don't know. I mean, it seems like a loom. It seems like a more useful skill because yeah, you can make a lot more complex stuff. With a loom, you can really only do like horizontal color work instead of you know the insignia and or even decreases very well. That's all knitting stuff. But anyways, let's do this. So slip one purlwise, slip. Okay, then we bring it around so we can knit. And back around, so we purl. See, now that we're starting to get into the next row, it starts to tighten up a little bit and might look a lot more even than the first row. Now that we actually have some more tight stitches. Is this right? Well, now I'm second guessing myself. Shoot. Uh, well, let's redo this now. Now that I messed up. We can just. I think so, yeah. You're probably right. Yeah, I've never used one before. It's mainly just for weaving, I guess. I'm not really sure what the capabilities or even limitations are for a loom, but all right, how am I supposed to do this? This is the thing with not knitting for quite a while. I don't really remember. Okay, that's a knit stitch, so slip it knitwise. I think the video that I used when I originally did this was they use an odd number of stitches, but I'm using even, so let's slip that. So in this case, for both rows, you use the same start for each row. So in this case, we slip one knitwise. Make sure it's tight. Bring the yarn over the purl the purl bumps, and that's how I could tell that I messed up, was that I was knitting the purls and purling the knits, and so that will create an alternating pattern on either side, which doesn't look right. So I'll probably show what I mean in terms of knitting the knits and purling the purls once I get a few more rows on here, because it's kind of hard to see with just a few rows like this once you're starting out. I remember when I was first learning this was the most confusing thing, and I messed up so many times just on these first few rows because it's so much harder to see what you're doing because the stitches are so loose. And of course, if you're just learning how to if you're just learning how to knit, then everything's just gonna look like a bundle of nothing. And see, there we go again. I messed up again. But luckily I caught it a little bit earlier this time. That's why you can't space out as much when you're doing one by one rib. There we go. I remember I thought it just looked terrible when I was starting out, like because the first few rows are so loose. That's just like, oh gosh, this is never going to come together. It's never going to look good, but it does. It eventually does. So as you start knitting, as you get more and more rows on there, it starts to contract, become more even. Or not contract, it starts to expand, become more even. And especially once you get your technique down, you can just go. Oh, here we go. Now it's starting to get easier. Just push all that up. Sure you got enough room. Man, that's really loose. Well, no. Once you pull it, it starts to even out as well. So in terms of how many rows I'm going to be doing for this, we have 48 stitches in total, which doesn't decrease until we start getting to the insignia. But before we do that, we're not really going off the number of rows because in the end it doesn't matter. It matters on the length of the tail. So we'll go until we get approximately, if I remember correctly, it's about 25 inches, and then we start the insignia. So it comes out in total to about 40 inches per tail, and it'll sit comfortably down like a little bit past the small of your back when it's worn properly. Who knows? Maybe I'll remeasure it once at some point before I get there, but we'll see. We will see. Okay. Remember how much faster stockinette feels when you're just knitting the entire row instead of knitting and then purling. It felt so much quicker because you don't have to alternate your yarn every time you make a stitch. But you still can't be too absent-minded with it, even in stockinette. Just in case you do mess up, this requires a lot more attention. Should probably put on some music at some point. Okay, we're almost at the edge here. And just like before, I'm going to continue in pattern as if we're just doing one by one rib. And even though we slipped this first one, we're still going to, in this case, purl into it. And that'll complete that edge. Pull that tail down, and then there we go. That's second row done. So once again, spread everything out, pull down on the edge a little bit to tighten it up. Bunch that up a little bit. Now even everything out. And you can already start to see we're getting a little bit of fabric on there, and once we spread everything out so it feels, I don't know, kind of natural, where the stitches will naturally kind of rest. There's a little bit of springiness to it that you can feel. Comes out to about 7 inches about, I would say. And of course it does look a little bit rough around. It's very hard to see because it's all white, but you can see a little bump right here. It doesn't really look too clean, but this edge doesn't really matter because once we actually sew it on, it'll be all the way up here on this edge that'll be tucked away, so it'll be by your neck and wrapped around by, you know, this huge piece, so it doesn't really matter. But yes, the entire goal of doing it one by one is mainly so you can have the reversible color work, like I said, but it's also, you know, very, very stretchy and very comfy, pretty lightweight. And it doesn't curl, which is also really important because if we did this in stockinette, then depending on which way you do it, one, you'll have a different texture on either side, and two, this edge wouldn't lie as flat as it does. I mean, kind of flat, but like it would probably be curling up around the edges such that, you know, not super bad, but it would definitely curl up around the edges, kind of like that, and you really don't want that. So yeah. So definitely gotta remember for the first tail that we're working on, we want to knit, slip the knit stitch on the very edge when starting out each row. But for the second tail, once we start working on that one, we're going to want to purl, slip as if to purl, slip purlwise, beginning each row, and that will make it even more symmetrical when we line up the two tails together. So in this case, there's a little bit of a asymmetry in terms of the color work because I didn't realize that you had to alternate which way you slip, knitwise or purlwise. But that's one of the many mistakes that I want to correct with this new design, or with this next scarf, I should say, just so it looks a lot better. Hold that back up. It is kind of a pain to carry this thing around because it is so much yarn, and it's practically double the amount of yarn that you would use for just a regular scarf that just goes around the neck. But because pretty much both of the tails is how much yarn you would use for a scarf that you just wrap around probably twice, maybe 3 times. But yeah, sorry, I'm getting texts, but I'll answer them a little bit later. So yes, this is all we really do is just keep going with one by one rip. And hopefully we don't mess up. But I don't know. Do I want to put on music now? I think I'm going to listen to something on my headphones, but in future streams I'll probably do some music in the background. But you want me to do music now? Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember where I had that pin. I think it's back at my mom's house, but I'm multiple states away now, so um, it's kind of funny you mentioned that though. It's of course I don't know if you know what the new insignia is going to be, but it's kind of related, I guess. It's not the NASA logo, that's for sure. Um, all right, I'll get. Let's see here. Why don't we start it off with some music from Breath of the Wild, shall we? Gosh. There we go. Okay. So now same thing. Or do you want to slip one knitwise? So we have to purl the next one, bring the yarn over. Purl. Yeah, it's all coming together. How's the music volume? Can you still hear me all right, even with it playing? Sweet. I was just on a YouTube video or a YouTube post, I should say, and they were talking about how lacking the Breath of the Wild music is, or not lacking, but how good the Breath of the Wild music is, despite it barely even being there. But it's like, oh my gosh. And I posted on there saying like, even though it's not plentiful, it makes the existing music that much more impactful. Like, whenever you go to a town, it just kind of enhances the liveliness that is there. But the champions themes, especially, like, oh my god, that's and Cass, and then the Divine Beast themes, both attacking and once you're in there, it's just so awesome. And Hyrule Castle is amazing. But when you have music like this, where it's very, I guess, just atmospheric and just hits on a piano, it's not too substantive, but it'll do. Kind of reminds me of Minecraft music in a way. Although for this style, I think, like the very ambient style, I think Minecraft does it better, in my opinion. Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's not true. Because there's very few songs I actually listen to a lot in Minecraft. But in Breath of the Wild, I listen to like all of them. Got a little bit more down right here. It does. There's like, so in this specific one, so this is the day theme, because it has Zelda's Lullaby in it. There's a very, I always love this little part in this one, where it's like a very deep piano note. I don't know why. It sounds right there. I always thought that was very interesting to add. But yeah, the like that. That's the whole reason why I love the music, especially the champion themes, because it's like their themes fit their characters so well. Oh, now we get the night version. Hmm. Yeah, I know, right? Well, that's so. It's always so interesting because they do that between the day theme, which has Zelda's Lullaby, and then the night theme, which has Link's theme, or I guess yeah, the original theme, and they do that a lot, surprisingly. Right? Well, not a lot, but in the Hyrule Castle theme, they also do the same thing, whether or not you're on the outside, which plays yeah the hero's theme, or on the inside, which plays Zelda's Lullaby. It's so weird. It's so awesome. Oh my, this is one of my favorites. Of course, this one calls back to Dragon Roost. I'm gonna clean off these needles really quick. They're getting a little grippy. So that's another reason why I like these needles is that you can take the yarn off just to clean it a little bit and put it back on. And it'll still be all good. always wondered if that little motif on that little flute was from Wind Waker or something, because it sounds like it would be from there. I don't know why. It sounds kind of like Dragon Roost almost. Something like that. Yeah, I posted it on a few of the subreddits there, and on Twitter, of course. But I mean, yeah, a lot of people liked it, but a lot of people were also asking, like, um, if there was a pattern anywhere, and so I was like, no, there's not. I did it all from scratch, but I'm willing to do it again. So I had a different insignia on mine and different colors and all that, and just to do it better overall. But so I guess that's what I'm doing now. So. Oh, the tassels. Yeah, well, that was like the thing that took me the longest because I was holding off on it for so long. Because even though they seem very simple, the thing is, whenever you make any yarn work ever, even if it's that small, what you have to do is, for example, on this piece, you have the long tail that you start off with, right? And then you have once you're done, you have a long tail that you end with as well. And that wouldn't be so bad, except it's for each color. So the tassels are two colors: the base color, which in this case was an off-white, and the red on the very tip. So I had to do, weave in one tail that would eventually just basically go into sewing it onto the actual part around the neck, and then weave in the other base color and into the tassel, and then weave both of the red ends into the tassel as well. So in total, I was weaving 4 ends in basically for every single tassel, which, if I remember correctly, there are 23 in total. So multiply that by 4. Yeah. So let's see, 92 ends I had to weave in all at once, which was just so annoying to do. So I procrastinated on that a ton. But I showed this to my mom when I was finished with pretty much the entire thing but the tassels back in, let's see, that was back in January or so. Yeah. And like, and she said she liked it better without the tassels, which, yeah, I mean, it looked good without it. It definitely looked something like that, like it's not from a video game, basically, without the tassels, which is why I'm not doing it this time because I want it to look a little bit more professional. But I want the original to be true to the game, so that's what I did for that one. But yeah, she didn't approve. But I think it looks pretty good considering it could look a lot worse. They do look kind of tacky, but I wanted to stay true to the original game, so that's what I did. This time around, and just to save the hassle of doing it, I'm not doing it this time. It definitely wouldn't look as good with this design. But yeah, so hopefully that'll shave off a bit of time and save me a bit of yarn. Not that it really matters. But I'm saving a bit of yarn anyways because the part around the neck I actually made too long accidentally, and I didn't realize it until I was actually done. So I'm going to shave that down by about 12 inches. So luckily it's going to take a lot less time that time around. I never really figure out where this theme played in the game. It always seems kind of like in the southern, like the Farron region or whatever. Kind of near the beaches. Those edges are starting to look nice. I really wish I could show this better. But since it's all white and we've got light behind me, even though it's starting to get dark out, but it's fucking out of the way. That's not much better. Oh, there you go. You can kind of see it a little bit better. You can start to see all the V's. Those are all the knit stitches, and then as you pull it apart, you can start to see the in-between. That's 1x1 ribs, so you have a layer of knit stitches on one side. You can pull it apart. Yeah, I mean that's only let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. But yeah, so it naturally closes up, and it's still stretchy, but it naturally closes up as you go along. I'm gonna open this back up so I can see. See what I'm doing. At some point, well, so this one, which is about the material for 2 scarves, because the tails themselves is about the length of, a normal scarf. It's, I guess in total it'll be 6 inches by, I guess, 80 inches, which is, about the area of a normal scarf, but it's split into 2 6-inch by 40-inch tails without the taper. But and those each took about, I mean, of course, it depends on how long, how often and how long you usually work on them. But in the case of these tails, it probably took, I'd like to say maybe 3 to 4 weeks. Because the real issue is that it takes about twice, or not twice as long, but it takes about the same amount of time. Or yeah, it takes about twice as long to do the color work, just the last 15 inches for the insignia, than it does to actually just do just the base color. Because not only for the color work are you working in 1x1 rib, which you're already doing for this anyways, but you're not doing any additional colors. But for the color work, you're working in 1x1 rib. You have multiple colors that you're working with, and you're decreasing the stitches as you go, which does reduce time instead of just doing it all in one rectangular block, but it still takes up more time than it would otherwise. And of course, if you mess up, then you're really screwed. So, which I did a few times for the tails, which I'm hoping to do better this time. But who knows? I mean, everybody makes mistakes. But yeah, but surprisingly, when I got the part around the neck, because it's instead of doing 1x1 rib, I just had to do basically a modified stockinette stitch, which is instead of alternating back and forth, you just do the same stitch per row. So the part around the neck actually took only about 2 weeks in total, even though it's the same 12 by 40 inches as the tails, just without any color work. So that's I don't know. So it depends on what part you're working on, how long you work on it for. Surprisingly, I don't like the Great Fairy theme that much. No, I'll leave it be. Oh, I said I'll leave it be. There we go. What? The Great Fairy theme? I don't know why. It's just it's never done it for me. Well, I don't know if it's the instrumentation here or if it's just too repetitive for me. That's good. I mean, it's not a bad piece of music. It's just, I don't know. I think it's too repetitive for my taste. And the syncopation with the piano isn't really doing it for me. Anyways, but I think I would probably prefer like the Great Fairy theme from the older games, not so much this game. I mean, you can like repetition. I won't judge. Don't worry. Oh, you do? All right, that's fine. I'm probably gonna keep going for another 30 minutes or so. But yeah, thanks for stopping in. I gotta set up a schedule to do this, but yeah, I'll try and set up a schedule for this. It'll probably be, I don't know. It'll probably be during the week actually, because I don't really have much going on during the week. Surprisingly, it's always on the weekends I got stuff going on. But yeah, I'll post about it. I'll let you guys know. All right, I'll keep that in mind. See you later. So here we go in terms of making the piece a little bit more neat, a little bit tighter as the rows go on. Every single time I'm alternating, in this case, I'm going to be doing a purl stitch. So purl, of course. Then I usually work very close to the needles, so I'm purling very close to the needle tips. So that'll automatically make it tighter because you're working with a smaller diameter near the tips. But also, once I do purl, I like to pull on it a little bit just to tighten it up around the needle and then do the yarn over. So in this case, I'm going to do a knit stitch. So I bring the work very close up to the edge of the needle, knit into it, try and keep the yarn pretty tight, and then pull to make the needle tight, and then I also pull in the opposite direction as well once I yarn over. And that way it makes it much tighter, and that'll tighten up the work as you're going along each row. And yeah. So that way, if you do that, it kind of makes knitting in general easier because you don't have to worry about how tight you're holding your yarn and pulling it once you're actually knitting the stitch. Just so long as you pull it tight afterwards, it'll be fine. If it starts to get too tight on either end, especially because you're holding it, spread it out along the needle. It'll bunch up on you, but just spread it out. Won't ruin the work or anything. It's just makes it easier. And of course, pull down whenever you get a chance, just to tighten up those purl bumps. Just makes it look neater. Ah. Don't pull down too hard whenever you do pull down. So for the edge stitches, in order to make them look nice and tight, and so that they don't look too loose on the edges, try and work very close to the needles and do not stretch them out. At the middle, with this, all the stitches not near the edge, all in the middle, they can kind of be stretched out. It'll mostly be fine. It'll mostly fix itself. But for the edge stitches, since they're just slip stitches, you really don't want to stretch those out because it'll look very loose, very uneven. So try and keep your work very close to the needles, like I'm doing here. See this stitch is right here, very close to the edge of the needles. So it's a smaller diameter. And in this case, just purl into it very close. Try not to put too much pressure into pulling it. So I'll stretch it out. You don't want that. So yeah, so far we already got a good inch on there. I'm still gonna go for about 30 more minutes and I'll call it for tonight. So at this rate, 1 hour, 1 inch. Just about. Of course I'm a little distracted, but yeah, 1 hour, 1 inch. So by that case we'll have let's see, about 1 day's worth of knitting to go until we start the insignia. So yeah, that's all this is. Just keep going back and forth. This is why you get used to the technique of knitting very quickly, both knitting and purling, because that's pretty much all you do. You start to get into the muscle memory. I've already started to get it back since I last knitted. Since I last knit anything, knitted. Grammar. And so once you get that muscle memory, I mean, it's just, you can put something on, whether it's a movie or, I don't know, you could talk with somebody, and just, so long as you're keeping your eyes on your work and you are aware of what you're doing, most of the time, you can be a little more absent-minded than that. Just as long as you know that you're knitting your knits and purling your purls, then it'll be all right. Try and catch your mistakes early. Just, if you can, return your focus back to your work, just so that you're not making any mistakes. If you do, you can catch them within a few stitches, so it's not too much of a hassle. Because you don't want to go an entire row, and when you're halfway down the next one, you realize that that you made a mistake. So you have to go and redo that entire row, take all the stitches off your needle, put them back on. It's just a huge pain that you don't want to go through. That's probably what took up most of my time making the last scarf, was fixing mistakes, especially ones that were multiple rows down, because either you unravel them or you got to get in there with either a crochet hook or some kind of MacGyver thing. I use like a bent paper clip basically to get in there and fix those mistakes, and it was not fun at all. It took at least 4 times as much time to get the mistakes fixed than it was to just knit them in the first place, or just knit an entire row in the first place. It is not fun. You definitely don't want to get into that trap every so often. I mean, mistakes are going to be inevitable, but try and avoid them if you can. Do your best. But I mean, other than that, it's a very, like I said, absent-minded activity, which it's very relaxing. I mean, if you can, because you're making something and you can make something you're proud of, and it's something tangible that you can physically say, like, oh yeah, I made this. This is something that I did myself. It's very fulfilling. It's very therapeutic, because you can just sit there and make something real. Just as a hobby, and you have something to use when you're done, something to pass the time while you're making it, something to talk about, something to do. There's another great example. Of course, is Mifa's theme, and so there's one chord progression I absolutely love in this piece, right in here. Oh, I get chills every single time. It's a very bittersweet, very melancholic theme. Actually, I wonder, depending on how long the I think this is the desert shrine theme, maybe? If I remember correctly. Anyways, if I have time, which I think I will. Well, maybe not. Who knows? Well, no, not for this stream. I'll save it for the next stream. But I want to play the some of the orchestral, like live orchestral versions of the soundtrack. It's amazing, especially the transitions that they do between each song. Like where we'll have the Rito Village theme goes straight into Revali's theme from the DLC, and it's such a perfect transition. Get that back up there. So now we can start to see. I'll show you guys here. The sun's starting to come down. So now if I can show you guys it all here. So you can start to see the pattern of the V's that you get in here. It's a little bit hard to see on this camera, but basically you start getting this pattern of V's, and those are knit stitches, and everything in between are purl stitches. And so with 1x1 rib, what you're doing is essentially creating a knit stitch like this, where you have the column of V's here, and then the very next stitch. So let's see. So this is the knit stitch, which corresponds to this stitch right here. And the very next one is a purl stitch. And if you can see on the camera, there are these little light spots in between. So here's the knit stitch. And right next to it, it's a little bit lighter, such that you have a little bump right here. And that's a purl bump. So each purl bump is what I mean. So you can see at pretty much every other stitch, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one. It's a little bit lighter, and so that's what I mean by knitting the knits and purling the purls. So naturally, when you're going along and you come across, a little, if you come across a V, you're going to want to knit that. If you come across a little purl bump as you're going, you're going to want to purl it. And that way you continue having the column of knits and the column of purls, which really just shows up as a column of knits on the other side, which is why it's symmetrical. That's also why it doesn't curl. And we're actually going to use the fact that the purls kind of tuck away and appear on the other side. Like if you stretch it open, the purls tuck into these little ridges in here, or I guess between the ribs. And we're going to use that to our advantage when we do the reversible intarsia for the color work. So that way it looks symmetrical on either side as well, instead of having the little border around the colors that you usually get with regular intarsia using an asymmetrical pattern like stockinette. Even if you use garter stitch, it's those I forget what they call them, floats maybe. You can still see the floats as you go along, and it'll appear as a line between the colors on one side but not the other. But in this case, it's reversible. Another trick just to get a little bit tighter, because you can see as we go down, here's the top edge, and as we go down, it starts to get a little bit neater, a little bit more even. But what you can do to also help with the tension for that is once you're done with the row, you use your fingers to just drag down those purl bumps and then pull down on your work. Not too hard, just very lightly pull down, and that'll tighten up those stitches, make them more even. So let's see, I probably have time for, I'll wait until this music runs out. This is a hour-long compilation, so about 16, 15 more minutes. So I probably should get like 2 more rows in, if I can. Let's see. It's kind of uncomfortable. So just sit back, relax, and knit away. Open this back up, let the sun back in so I can see what I'm doing. So pull that. Slip one knitwise. Pull around. Purl. I also don't remember where this song comes up in the game. I've always heard it occasionally, but I don't know what triggers it. Like if it's a specific region or a specific area, if there's a shrine nearby or whatnot. But Love this theme. At least for the setting that it plays at, it fits so well. Looks like that was just about right in terms of timing. So there we go. After about an hour and a half, we already have about 1.5 inches. So let me show you guys what the edge will look like. You can barely even see it once again. better way of doing this. All right. You guys can see a little bit. Maybe not, but well, it's essentially just a kind of like a longer knit stitch on the edge, and it creates a very sharp edge, very similar to the cast-on edge, which is pretty straight from all things considered, but yeah, nice chain. This edge is a lot nicer. Very straight edge. So yeah, so that's probably where I'll stop for now. Um, I still don't know when I'm going to be doing scheduling for these streams, but I'm hoping it'll be on a regular basis, whether or not it's every other weekday on a certain day at a certain time. It'll probably be in the evening, so after 5 p.m. Central Time. And yeah, so if you want to knit along with me, go ahead. If not, I definitely recommend trying it up. This would be a great first project. The scarf is beautiful, very cheap as well. Until all the yarn costs about, including the other colors, it costs about say about $25. Most of the value is the time that you put into it. Yeah, very very stylish, very warm. So yeah. So next stream we'll just continue working on the tail here and just do that until we get to the actual color work portion and the insignia, and I'll finally share and reveal and share the pattern that I'm working on for that. Let's see. And lastly, I'll put some videos for how to knit. Just if you're just starting out, how to knit. Do a knit stitch, purl stitch, how to do a long tail cast on, and the video that I used to do the 1x1 rib with the selvedge edges. And they have a much better camera than I do, so it'll definitely be a lot easier to follow along than what I'm doing here. But yeah, that should get you started, and then you're pretty much golden. You just have to repeat that until we get to the insignia. So until then, I'll post about this again for next time, and hopefully have a schedule by then. Hopefully a little bit better setup here, but we'll see. So yeah, until then, have a good night, and I'll see you next time.